One of President Obama's closest advisors is sharing behind-the-scenes stories from the biggest moments of the presidency. Ben Rhodes was a speechwriter during the 2008 Obama campaign. After the election, he became Deputy National Security Advisor. Rhodes was so close with the president that the two were often said to have a mind meld. In his new book, The World as It Is, a memoir of the Obama White House, Rhodes pulls back the curtain on U.S. foreign policy during the Obama years. I sat down with Ben, who is the brother of CBS News President David Rhodes, to talk about his book and life after leaving the White House. It's just been over 500 days now since you were on the inside looking out from your perch at the White House, and I wonder, how do things look to you now from the outside?
Well, they look unrecognizable, to tell you the truth. I mean, people ask me, you must be upset about this policy or that policy that Trump is changing. But the more upsetting thing is, I just worked through, in writing this, 8 years of a lot of effort to just try to live up to the offices you're in and just try to, hold yourself to a certain standard. And and just watching the approach to governing and the kind of casual approach to the truth and the hostility to allies and the press, and it's every day I see something that I could never have imagined happening when we were there, not just us, but even kind of just any normal administration. And so it's been a jarring experience because I see this place that I know so well just operating so differently.
Your area of focus was foreign policy, so I want to turn to some foreign policy questions. You wrote that first of all, you wrote about the Obama campaign winning the presidency without the people who were the arbiters of opinion in Washington. If you were to take that quote out of context, it could very well apply to Donald Trump's campaign.
Yes. Yeah.
So looking back on it now, should you have anticipated what came next with the election?
Yes, and I say this, after the election, when I woke up the next morning, kind of shaking off the shock, I say that it occurred to me that when you strip out some of the racism and misogyny in the Trump campaign, the core message, Hillary Clinton is part of a corrupt establishment that can't bring change. That was our message in 2008, and I talk about in the book, the Iraq War really colored the debate on national security, and we made arguments that essentially, look, the people who got us into this war can't be trusted. And Hillary Clinton was one of those people. She had voted for the Iraq War. And we had a whole set of arguments about kind of how the establishment had failed people and that there needed to be change. And so, Donald Trump could not be more of a different change candidate than Barack Obama. But, when I was more active in politics in the campaign, definitely knew how to, build a change message. And, I did see in the Trump campaign, echoes of that, albeit through a completely different filter, with a completely different destination in mind.
In the book, you write about some guidance from then Vice President Joe Biden regarding foreign policy that, quote, all foreign policy is an extension of personal relationships. And then later in describing your initial meeting with Raul Castro's son, when you were looking at opening up relations there, this is what you said about that initial meeting, quote, we accomplished our minimal objectives for the meeting, establishing a channel, building a relationship, agreeing that we would meet again in a few weeks. Understanding that these are vastly different scenarios, if President Trump is able to accomplish those objectives that you spelled out regarding your Cuba meeting, when he sits down with Kim Jong-un, will that be a success?
Well, here's the difference. We were just beginning a relationship with Cuba, just like they're trying to begin a relationship with North Korea. That is definitely similar. But before President Obama met with Raul Castro, I met probably 20 times with Alejandro Castro, his son. Those meetings tended to go 8 hours, 12 hours. When you don't know each other at all. I mean, I remember the first meeting I had with Alejandro Castro, and I never even actually revealed that he was my interlocutor to this book. We spent 8 hours just covering the history of the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Kennedy assassination and the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Mostly you just sitting there nodding.
Mostly me listening, but there's a lot of throat clearing that has to take place. And gradually over time that allowed us to build a relationship, establish some trust, and then get to difficult issues. My worry about how they're doing it is, they're putting the head of state meeting pretty early in the process. I do think if they can establish rapport and build some sense of mutual trust, that is helpful. However, I don't feel like the issues they're discussing, the nuclear issues, have been really teed up. And so we probably wouldn't have sent President Obama into a meeting of this kind of these stakes without knowing pretty precisely what we're trying to accomplish. And I worry, as much as I support diplomacy with North Korea, that the head of state summit is happening too soon in the process. There need to be more meetings to plow that ground and build that agenda before he would come, and that's how I would do it differently.
But if, in fact, the maxim is true, or something you subscribe to, Vice President Biden saying all foreign policy is an extension of personal relationships, then isn't, by that definition, isn't President Trump pursuing a correct course of action and trying to establish a personal relationship with Kim Jong-un?
Look, well, yes, I think so, and I think diplomacy is the right course to pursue here. One of the ironies is, as I write about, when Obama first said he would meet with the leadership of Iran and North Korea, we were killed by the right wing.
It was a sign of weakness.
As this weakness, and so I get whiplash every day where things that if we did them, we'd be getting pilloried for, are suddenly genius, because Trump is doing them. Look, bottom line is, it's preferable, I believe, always to try to talk things out and pursue diplomacy before you move to other options. I'm glad they're doing it. My worry, though, the risk is, if it's not set up right and if they don't know what they're trying to accomplish clearly, you either risk missing the opportunity. So you have the meeting and there's not much of an outcome, or it goes poorly and you're back in a situation where there could be a conflict. So I just would like to see them again give, frankly, the diplomacy a better chance to succeed than I've seen thus far.
The White House has framed its new and proposed tariffs, both the ones on our allies and the ones on other countries, as a national security issue. Based on your own experience in the White House when it comes to foreign policy, is that a rationale that you subscribe to?
No, I think I get bureaucratically, it's a justification that allows them to take certain actions. But it sends a message, if you're telling Canada that they're a national security threat, that's offensive to Canadians and it's offensive to Europeans, and not just on the surface level. These are they fought with us in Afghanistan. They've actually bled to be with us in tough times. The other thing I worry about is over time how does like a China take advantage of this? And the story I remember is when we were in the final summit meeting with Xi Jinping after the election. Obama was warning him there may be trade actions. Trump is serious about this trade stuff, and Xi looked very comfortable. He said, "Look, if an immature leader throws the world into chaos, the world will know who to blame." And he was seeing a dynamic where if the U.S. is starting trade wars and alienating our allies, that's a big opening for China, because they're going to go to those countries and say, look, we'll do trade deals with you. And what I worry is that this leads to a situation where countries like China more aggressively replace the United States as the trading partners of choice for not just countries in Africa and Latin America, but our allies in Europe and Canada.
Switching gears, it's been reported recently that the Trump campaign hired an Israeli private intelligence agency or investigative firm, Black Cube, to dig up dirt on you as part of an attempt to discredit the nuclear deal with Iran, which you played a large role in shaping. What was your reaction when you found out that this was happening and that it was also the same company that Harvey Weinstein used to track women who were alleging sexual misconduct against him?
I had become accustomed to being kind of a target. At some point, as I write about, this target got put on my back, and I kind of became one of the villains. And I describe what it's like to be, a pretty normal person. I was 29 when I went to work for Obama, and suddenly, it's one kind of cloud of accusation after another. Benghazi and Iran, there's always something, and it was a kind of weighing experience to feel like, wow, there are millions of people out there who don't know me and they hate me, because they're consuming all this information about what a bad guy I am, and it's a strange experience to have. I will tell you that even though I dealt with that for years, the black cube thing was even more jarring because it involved my family. We figured out that they had reached out to my wife and tried to contact her and said they pretended to be movie producers, and there's something so sinister about bringing people's families into it that it's kind of hard even for me to digest. And if in fact the Trump people were involved, it's also just a whole new line crossed. I mean, yeah, sure, in politics there's like opposition research that campaigns do against other candidates. But the notion that you would hire somebody, foreign intelligence agents, to discredit former officials, that's a whole new ballgame in American politics.
Well, Black Cube is known for its close ties to higher-ups in the Israeli government. Yeah. Have you considered the possibility that they were somehow involved in collecting information? And what's your assessment? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, all I know is that I would be very surprised if a group of former Mossad agents are somehow operating without the knowledge of the Israeli government in some fashion. I mean, I don't know. I'm not, but I know how, how intelligence operates, and it's just hard for me to fathom a scenario where a group of former Mossad could operate without somebody in the Israeli government, not necessarily saying they're directing it, but at least knowing it's going on.
Do you think there need to be some repercussions as a result of that?
Well, I think I'm uncomfortable, not just me personally, but this whole notion of using kind of foreign intelligence agents, essentially, the U.S.-Israel relationship is so important, and the U.S.-Israel intelligence relationship is so important to our mutual security. The politics should be out of it, So I do think it's important that this shouldn't happen, and I wouldn't like it if a bunch of former CIA people were, trying to dig up dirt on Israelis. I don't think that'd be good either. I think that this is crossing a line that's blending potentially politics and national security in a way that in the long term is not good for anybody.